Hey guys, today I want to show you how you can take your mix from something like this to something like this.
Sein und allein zu stehen. Ich werde nie mehr weinen, ich geh gerade meinen Weg. Wische diese Tränen weg aus meinem Gesicht.
A really cool mix breakdown for you. It's for the track called Chosen One from Sanito. This mix is really simple. This is Sanito's probably most popular track on Spotify, which for me was surprising, not because the track is bad or anything like that. I think the track is amazing. It has a lot of feelings, it has a great performance, but I usually associate success of a track with how I feel about the effort I put in the actual mix. If I spend more time on a mix, if I have crazy plugin chains, then the track should be more successful, right? Wrong. Let's jump into the session. This is the session. It's a fairly simple session. We have just the MP3 beat and the vocal tracks. For the vocal tracks, I have received 3 different lead tracks and the doubles. One thing that I want to mention is that this track is older. I believe it's more than a year since I've mixed and mastered this track. So you're gonna see in the project a couple of missing plugin, and I will talk about that at that point. Like I've said, I'm using my own template. This is available for purchase. The beat tracks are going to a beat bus. This is the beat bus. That bus goes to the main output. Then in the initial session, I had 3 different lead vocals that are going to the verse bus. The other additional vocals are going to the other vocal buses: hook, ad-libs, and special box. One thing that you should know is that the naming of the buses isn't that relevant. For example, I have the bus called ad-libs. Here you will see in the session that I have doubles and not ad-libs. Special box, the same thing. You can use a different naming, 1, 2, 3 vocal buses. That's just my setup. All those 4 buses are going out to the main vocal bus. That vocal bus goes out to the main output. Now let's talk about the 2-bus processing. You can see that I am missing Ozone 4. That's what I was using previously until the God particle was released, and I started using just that. I think it's a good replacement. It does actually sound pretty good compared to the Ozone counterpart. What I want to do is bypass all the processing done on the vocals, and we're gonna start breaking the mix down. Now we should have just the 2-bus processing. Bypass the 2-bus processing, keep just the limiter, and this is how the initial mix sounds.
Ich werde nie mehr weinen, ich geh gerade meinen Weg. Wische diese Tränen weg aus meinem Gesicht. Siehst du dieses Feuer in meinen Augen, in meinem Blick?
Let's add the BX Digital. This is the main EQ that I was using back in the day. Some stereo width, just cutting some of the nasty resonant frequencies around 500. Plus I've used the mono maker. Now let's add the God particle. On the EQ I have -1 on the bass. The beat is pretty bass heavy and I was hitting it a bit too hard. I have the amount on the God particle at 120.
Zu sein und allein zu stehen. Ich werde nie mehr weinen, ich geh gerade meinen Weg. Wische diese Tränen weg aus meinem Gesicht.
The input is pushed just to achieve that target.
Siehst du dieses Feuer in meinen Augen, in meinem Blick?
And that's it for the 2-bus processing. Usually this is how it goes. The God particle is there and I mix into it. For me it's something special. I like the sound of it, like I've liked the sound of Ozone 4 with the Jason Joshua preset. Now what I want to do is break down the vocal processing. One thing that I did with this track is I've mixed the lead vocals with hardware, and that hardware is the Shelford channel. Can't recall exactly the settings that I've used on the Shelford channel, but I have some of favorite settings that I usually use on vocals. I'm gonna showcase that right now. The three lead vocals are going to the verse bus. I will insert the pipeline plugin. This is how I use hardware in Studio One. Adding the connector, you can see that I have the Shelford inserted in the loop. Now I want to replicate the processing that I did with the Shelford on the lead vocal. I usually tend to start with the high-pass filter.
Ich werd nie mehr weinen, ich geh gerade meinen Weg. Wische diese Tränen weg aus meinem Gesicht. Siehst du dieses Feuer in meinen Augen, in meinem Blick? Sie waren nicht da für mich. Baby, siehst du, wozu ich jetzt in der Lage bin?
Something around 100 Hz sounds just fine, just removing that nasty bottom end. With the EQ, it sounds like this.
Liebe und mach nur das, was mein Herz mir sagt. Ich glaube nicht, dass ich schon jemals einmal stärker war. Wow, allein zu sein und allein zu stehen. Ich werd nie mehr weinen, ich geh gerade meinen Weg. Wische diese Tränen weg aus meinem Gesicht. Siehst du dieses Feuer in meinen Augen, in meinem Blick? Sie waren nicht da für mich. Baby, siehst du, wozu ich jetzt in der Lage bin? Verbreite Liebe und mach nur...
On the EQ, I have a couple of dBs at 8K, then I am removing 3.5K because that is a frequency that I don't like on Sanito's voice.
Nur das, was mein Herz mir sagt. Ich glaube nicht, dass ich schon jemals einmal stärker war.
It's pretty aggressive and I don't like that. I'm also adding just a touch at 60 Hz to add more body to the vocals.
Wow, allein zu sein und allein zu stehen.
Now for the compressor, I'm using a 2:1 ratio, medium to fast, attack and release, and this is how it sounds.
Ich werd nie mehr weinen, ich geh gerade meinen Weg. Wische diese Tränen weg aus meinem Gesicht. Siehst du dieses Feuer in meinen Augen, in meinem Blick? Sie waren nicht da für mich. Baby, siehst du, wozu ich jetzt in der Lage bin? Verbreite Liebe und mach nur das, was mein Herz mir sagt. Ich glaube nicht, dass ich schon jemals einmal stärker war. Wow, allein zu sein und allein zu stehen. Ich werd nie mehr weinen.
The final touch when it comes to the Shelford processing is to add some red silk.
Geh gerade meinen Weg, wische diese Tränen weg aus meinem Gesicht. Siehst du dieses Feuer in meinen Augen, in meinem Blick? Sie waren nicht da für mich. Baby, siehst du, wozu ich jetzt in der Lage bin? Verbreite Liebe und mach nur das, was mein Herz mir sagt. Ich glaube nicht, dass ich schon jemals einmal stärker war. Wow, allein zu sein und allein zu stehen. Ich werd nie mehr weinen, ich geh gerade meinen Weg.
Let me show you how much gain reduction I am actually doing with the compressor.
Diese Tränen weg aus meinem Gesicht. Siehst du dieses Feuer in meinen Augen, in meinem Blick? Sie waren nicht da für mich. Baby, siehst du, wozu ich jetzt in der Lage bin?
Between 5 dB and 7 dB of gain reduction. And this is a similar processing that I did on the original track. Now that you saw the settings on the Shelford, I can actually play you the lead vocal with the initial settings on the Shelford. Let's disable the unprocessed tracks. This is how I usually do it. I get a track, I set everything up, I start mixing, print the vocals through hardware, disable the original tracks, keep them in the session in case that I need them. Now this is the processed track.
Allein zu sein und allein zu stehen. Ich werd nie mehr weinen, ich geh gerade meinen Weg. Wische diese Tränen weg aus meinem Gesicht. Siehst du dieses Feuer in meinen Augen, in meinem Blick?
Pretty cool sounding vocals, aggressive, in your face, compressed. Now let's move to the sends that I have on the lead vocal. I don't have that many reverbs or delays on this particular track. What I've used is 7 Heaven Professional with the Reflect Hall B.
Allein zu sein und allein zu stehen. Ich werd nie mehr weinen, ich geh gerade meinen Weg. Wische diese Tränen weg aus meinem Gesicht. Siehst du dieses Feuer in meinen Augen, in meinem Blick? Sie waren nicht da für mich. Baby, siehst du, wozu ich jetzt in der Lage bin?
Then I have another reverb from Valhalla Vintage Verb. This one sounds like this.
Verbreite Liebe und mach nur das, was mein Herz mir sagt. Ich glaube nicht, dass ich schon jemals...
just to create some ambience around the vocal. This is with the two reverbs.
Zu sein und allein zu stehen. Ich werde nie mehr weinen, ich gehe gerade meinen Weg. Wische diese Tränen weg aus.
I like how the Seventh Heaven has that pre-delay. It feels like the vocals are moving just slightly offbeat, and it's an effect that I like to use. Then we have two different delays, and those delays are automated. Let's start with the first one. It's automated in this section.
Ich glaub, ich bin der Chosen One. Ich komm nicht mehr zurück, denn ich bin long gone. Und schaue nicht nach unten, ich will hoch hinaus.
The classic Echo Boy with the distorted style. Still like it.
Mach nur, was mein Herz mir sagt. Doch muss.
And the other one, the rap lay, is automated again on little specific parts.
Und allein zu stehen. Ich werde nie mehr weinen, ich gehe gerade meinen Weg.
Before hitting the Echo Boy, I'm using degrader from Clefgrand with filtering, reducing the sample rate, reducing the bit depth, adding tons of saturation. The delay is in ping pong mode.
Diese Tränen weg aus meinem Gesicht.
With the splattered style, plus I am removing all the top end, because without the EQ it sounds like this. Pretty aggressive, but I'm also controlling the output gain of the delay with the last EQ. This is a way that I gain stage things when mixing. And this is everything that I have in terms of sends on the main vocals. Now what I want to do is break down the doubles and other vocals. Let's start with the ad-libs. And I have just two tracks that are going into the ad-lib bus. This track right here in the beginning and this track right here.
Play so hard.
The processing on the ad-libs, and I'm smiling because, like I've said in the beginning, this is a really simple mix, and I believe that everybody can do it. CLA effects, and that's it.
So hard, play so hard.
Just using the CLA effects for the filter and adding reverb. I don't have any other processing on the actual tracks. I just have a vintage plate on the intro, automated on this section. I just needed that part to be wetter. That's it for the ad-lib bus. If we move to the hook bus, in the hook bus we have multiple tracks, I believe 3 tracks. We have the doubles for the hook. One high, one low, and let's start with the first plugin. The All Schmidt plugin that I like using on buses. Compression is 100%, adding some air, adding some echo. Also gain staging. You can see that I am reducing the level of the tracks by 12 dB. Stage 1, again from Lipwing, adding some stereo spread to those doubles. It's a really obvious effect, nothing subtle is happening here with the Stage 1 plugin. The EQ, cutting some 3.5 and some 300 Hertz. Also, I have reverb called High Verb on this bus. This is my classic top-end reverb.
Allein zu sein und allein zu stehen. Ich werde nie mehr weinen, ich gehe gerade meinen Weg.
It's splashy, but it adds some really nice character to the track. And this is the processing on those tracks. What we have left is the processing done on the special vox. The special vox is a bit different because I have another bus going into that bus. I have this tracks that I've called intro.
Hab all diese Monster, schreib all diese Songs, damit ich alles vergesse.
And this is the processing that I have on those. I have a doubler from Waves.
All diese Monster,
Really low in the mix because it's doing just this.
schreib all die.
Adding a lower octave just to make them a bit fuller. This one is something that I'm not using that often, but for the tracks I was browsing the presets and the airborne vox sounded pretty nice.
Monster, schreib all diese Songs.
Then an EQ doing a lot of corrective stuff.
Monster,
The SR.
schreib all diese Songs.
And I have trap reverb, the Valhalla vintage verb, plus the usual delay.
Damit ich alles vergesse.
And this is automated on certain phrases.
All diese Monster, schreib all die.
On this hook deep, I have an EQ.
Ich geh gerade meinen Weg.
I didn't want the low end to interfere at all. On this hook high, that's right here.
Ich komm nicht mehr zurück, denn ich bin long gone. Schau nicht nach unten,
I have a degrader,
ich will hoch hinaus.
pretty distorted, and then filter.
Komm nicht mehr zurück, denn ich bin long gone. Schau
Another EQ removing 5K.
nicht nach unten, ich will hoch hinaus. Baby, es tut mir leid, du kriegst von mir keinen Blumenstrauß.
And two different sends, ping pong.
Komm nicht mehr zurück, denn ich bin long gone. Baby, es tut mir leid, du kriegst von mir keinen Blumenstrauß. Denn das ist alles hier.
And all those vocals are going to this special Vox bus.
Allein zu sein und allein zu stehen.
Here I have all Schmidt, different settings, same echo level, but now I am removing some of the body, decreasing the gain, the output gain.
Ich werd nie mehr weinen, ich geh gerade meinen Weg.
Lastly, to finish off the processing on this, we have some corrective EQ. Pretty heavy corrective EQ.
Wische diese Tränen weg aus meinem Gesicht. Siehst du dieses Feuer in meinen Augen, in meinem Blick? Sie waren nicht da für mich. Baby, siehst du, wozu ich jetzt in der Lage bin? Verbreite Liebe und mach nur das, was mein Herz mir sagt. Ich glaube nicht, dass ich schon jemals einmal stärker war. Oh, ja, ich glaube, ich bin der Chosen One. Ich komm nicht mehr zurück, denn ich bin long gone. Und schau nicht nach unten.
On this beginning track, we have some EQ. On the lead vocal that's going to the verse bus, this is what I have. Corrective EQ, and I am using a shelf in dynamic mode
Allein zu sein und allein zu stehen.
to control the low end, a cut at 441.
Ich
Sounded pretty boxy at that frequency, and at 1.5, just 1 dB of reduction.
wische diese Tränen weg aus meinem Gesicht. Siehst du dieses Feuer in meinen Augen, in meinem Blick?
One thing that I like doing on lead vocals is to add inflator. This makes the vocals even more aggressive and they cut through the mix a bit better. This is the vocals without the inflator.
Allein zu sein und allein zu stehen. Ich werd nie mehr weinen, ich geh gerade meinen Weg. Wische diese Tränen weg aus meinem Gesicht. Siehst du dieses Feuer in meinen Augen, in meinem Blick? Sie waren nicht da für mich. Baby, siehst du, wozu ich jetzt in der Lage bin? Verbreite Liebe und mach nur das, was...
And this is done after I got some feedback from Sanito. He wanted the lead vocal to be more upfront, and this is what I like to do. Instead of just pushing up the level, I like adding some harmonic content with plugins like the inflator. Some final processing that is done on the actual main vocal bus. There I have soothe, and this is making sure that the vocal is not too aggressive.
Zu sein und allein zu stehen. Ich werd nie mehr weinen, ich geh gerade meinen Weg. Wische diese Tränen weg aus meinem Gesicht. Siehst du dieses Feuer in meinen Augen, in meinem Blick?
Another EQ, this time doing multiple dynamic EQ points, just to make sure that some frequencies don't poke out that much.
Zu sein und allein zu stehen. Ich werd nie mehr weinen, ich geh gerade meinen Weg. Wische diese Tränen weg aus meinem Gesicht. Siehst du dieses Feuer in
A DSR,
meinen Augen, in meinem Blick. Sie waren nicht da für mich. Baby, siehst du, wozu ich jetzt in der Lage bin?
but you can see that I'm not doing that much DSing. It's just around 3 dB of gain reduction on the DSR. That's pretty subtle. On the beat track spacer, sidechain with the vocals, just to make sure that I can make the vocals to sit better.
Zu sein und allein zu stehen. Ich werd nie mehr weinen, ich geh gerade meinen Weg. Wische diese Tränen weg aus meinem Gesicht. Siehst du dieses Feuer in...
So it's sidechained. I have a couple of videos on this actual technique, and this is what I usually do when I have MP3 beats with vocals. Also what I did on the effects bus, this is where all the reverbs, all the sends go. I added Soothe 2 just to keep that in check.
In meinen Augen, in meinem Blick. Liebe und mach nur das, was mein Herz mir sagt. Ich glaube nicht, dass ich schon jemals einmal stärker war. Oh, ja, ich glaube, ich bin der Chosen One. Ich komm nicht mehr zurück, denn ich bin long gone. Und schaue nicht nach unten, ich will hoch hinaus. Baby, es tut mir leid, du kriegst von mir keinen Blumenstrauß, denn das ist alles hier.
Another thing that I like doing when I have clicks on vocals is to use the RX mouth declick. This is usually at the end of the processing. I just like leaving it off when I work because it introduces some latency. And this is the processing. This is how I've mixed the track. You can see that it's a minimalistic approach based on workflow, using plugins like the CLA effects, using plugins like the All Schmidt, just to make sure that I can move fast, I can keep the vibe going on. It's a different approach, but sometimes this works better. Like I said in the beginning, this is probably the biggest song for Sanito. I believe he has 2 million plays or something like that on Spotify, with a mix done just like this. Indeed, the processing done with the Shelford made a big difference, and it's the sound of the lead vocal. But other than that, you saw me keeping it really simple, really basic. Most of the time I tend to overcomplicate things that should be kept simple. This was the mix breakdown for the Chosen One. I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, subscribe, drop a like. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram. Thanks again for all the support, and see you guys really soon. Cheers.